Economic Development Partnership update, and Mrs. Elizabeth Teeters from Director of Economic Development will be kicking this off.
Good afternoon, Mayor and City Council. Before I turn it over to Mr. Lopez from Mavita, I just want to let everybody know that a few weeks ago, the governor held the Governor's Conference on Economic Development here up in Albuquerque, and Mavita was awarded the Certified Economic Development Award, just one of 7 organizations in the state to receive it. So I just want to send that congratulations. And with that, I will turn it over to Mr. Lopez.
Okay, thank you, Elizabeth. Congratulations, Davin. Not surprised though. You do a great. You and your team do a great job.
Mayor, thank you, and thank you for the time today, Mayor and City Council. I know we were supposed to do this presentation, I think, back in the August time frame, and unfortunately we were in travel at the time, but this is a year-end review of our fiscal year that ended June 30th of 2022. I can start off by saying, we're going to go over the metrics over our service agreement with you today. But many of you have heard, but maybe not all of you have heard, we've been working a lot on strategic elements of going forward with economic development. It's probably going to be too long to discuss in this forum today, but I would be happy during another work session to get into more details. I'll just touch upon it very quickly while I'm here, though. But first and foremost, just to let you know a little bit about Mercia Valley Economic Development Alliance. I don't know if I stated my name, Davin Lopez, President and CEO. We are a full-service 501c3 economic development organization. Our mission is to grow the wealth and health of Doña Ana County through the creation of economic-based job opportunities for its residents. In that, we engage in industry attraction, trying to be very competitive against communities and states across the country in terms of bringing economic-based jobs to the area. We also have a pretty aggressive business retention and expansion program where we work with existing companies trying to assist them in their growth and retaining their business here in Las Cruces. In that capacity, we kind of are the sales agent. We hear a lot on the road from competition. We hear a lot on the road from clients and what they like about our products and don't. So we feel we are an economic development advisory service to the city, the county, and the state. And as I mentioned, we've been doing a lot strategically to build our capacity so we can be more competitive with projects going forward. Our board and team, our board of directors is 24 members. It's both public and private sector. As you can see, City of Las Cruces, Doña Ana County, NMSU, DACC, Las Cruces Public Schools, the chambers all support our efforts and do sit on our board. Excuse me. And we have a diverse private sector portion of the board, and amongst our board support, in addition to the City of Las Cruces and Doña Ana County being fiscal supporters of us, we also have about 100 private sector companies, much like a chamber, that supports our economic development efforts and strategy for the region. You'll see that is our team on the right there. We have over 50 years of direct economic development experience in New Mexico, and we've been restructuring our team this past year so that we can cover the different service categories of marketing and industry attraction and business retention and expansion so that we really are fully aligned with the services that we are offering the city. Let you know a little bit about our total results for the year because we are regional and we represent the entire Doña Ana County. So we do have metrics that our board requires of us. You'll see that the green line is where we should be at the end of the year in terms of our performance. In almost all categories, we surpassed the green line, but really in the big ones in terms of job creation, capital investment, and payroll generated is where we really surpassed. The capital investment was our second largest ever in our history, only behind when Union Pacific came with their intermodal facility to the area about 6-7 years ago. To the left are the companies that we helped represent to support the 777 jobs that were created. I'd like to also say we had an annual target of creating 650 jobs. We actually put a benchmark upon ourselves, whereas in the past, our benchmark was 450 job creation per year. We pushed it by 200 plus in our metrics, and we still surpassed that this past year as well. The next slide represents the actual metrics towards our service agreement with the City of Las Cruces. It looks very much the same in terms of marketing. We look at site visits. That's where companies are actually have feet on the ground, kicking dirt, looking at facilities. Total job creation, payroll generated, capital investment, and retention and expansion consultations to local companies. The additional factor here that is not on the other dashboard is job creation at the Las Cruces Innovation and Industrial Park. That is very specific metrics to the City of Las Cruces within the service agreement. And as you can see, in every area, we did surpass our marks, especially within Las Cruces Innovation and Industrial Park. And the companies to your left represent how those jobs are categorized. 150 jobs were created with Electronic Caregiver, who are putting $30 million, with Saputo, putting $30 million into capital investment. 120 jobs with the Electronic Caregiver. That was phase one, and I'll talk about phase two in a second. Of course, you're all very well of Artico and their announcement to create 60 jobs and put $32 million into a cold storage at the industrial park. And then Yellowbird, we assisted them along with the state in creating 32 jobs as they're growing forward with their market expansion. And they're expanding their market out of the Las Cruces metro area to provide more services into Texas, and that was part of their expansion. When we look at the City of Las Cruces and what it means to our specific categories of metrics, we had 61% of all project responses included sites that we showed Las Cruces. Of all of our site visits, 67% were for locations within Las Cruces. In terms of our retention and expansion consultations with existing companies, 71% of those consultations took place with local companies in Las Cruces. Of all the announced jobs, 47% of those were announced for the City of Las Cruces. Surprisingly, only shortly behind, you might think it's Santa Teresa, which is usually first or second when we go back and forth, but in this past year it was actually Chamberino. With WTEC and their announcement of over 300 jobs. And I mention that importantly because when you look at WTEC Chamberino's proximity to Las Cruces is going to benefit quite a bit. The residents of Las Cruces are going to be benefiting quite a bit from that expansion taking place, even though it's outside the city limits. And then 29% of all capital investments that were announced took place within the City of Las Cruces as well. When we look at our 5-year comparisons, I will go back to fiscal year 18 and 19 when we look at average wages. That's a little bit of an anomaly. And sometimes we do go back and adjust numbers based on actual performance. So, but still, that will be a high year. But as you can see, outside of that year, we have seen consistent growth in terms of average wages of the jobs that we're trying to bring here to Las Cruces and grow in Las Cruces. Overall, we saw 362 jobs within the City of Las Cruces announced this past year. It's not the highest in performance of the last 5 years, but it is consistent. But you'll see that $73 million in new capital investment was one of our highest in terms of the City of Las Cruces in really the past 10 years, the past decade. Of course, we look at capital investment very closely because that creates almost an immediate tax base to the City of Las Cruces. We run a lot of impact analysis. I think probably many of you have been in past presentations or have seen our annual report. We try to do impact analysis to illustrate the direct, indirect, and impact and induced impacts of what these jobs mean to the community at large. So based on those number of jobs created, our impact analysis estimates that over $87 million in new household spending will take place in the community over the next 5 years. Now that's based on past census data. That's traditionally if residents in Las Cruces spend in the same manner that they've spent in the past, that $87 million in new household spending should take place amongst all of our businesses in the community. What it means to the tax base is that those jobs would create over the next 5 years, $2.3 million in new revenue for the state of New Mexico, close to 1.2 revenue for the City of Las Cruces, and additionally $871,000 for the Las Cruces public school systems and DACC because they are part of the mill rate calculation. So when I showed you the impact analysis, we're looking at this past year's results and we're trying to estimate going forward, trying to predict going forward what the new tax base and what household spending would look like. We use in-plan data, which is used by economists all around the country. But what we do after that is then we try to understand what has been the actual impact to the city of Las Cruces where we look backwards now, and we try to adjust numbers. So for example, let's say a company announced 8 years ago and they were only in the marketplace for 4 years, for some reason they left or they downsized. We try to go back and factor that in, so we try to really understand what our return on investment, well, what your return on investment to us means. So this is kind of just a preface to what that looks like, but you'll see over the last 10 years or 12 years, the jobs created per year and capital investment, and what that means in terms of a cumulative ROI based on your investment to us over the last 12 years. It's a running return on investment, but we're at a point right now where, based on your investment in Mavita, 149% return came to the city based on new tax revenue that's being generated. If you include the impact to be the tax base of the Las Cruces public school system and DACC as well, if you were to include that in the factoring it, you'd see it be about a 242% cumulative return on investment over time. I think most of us, given in this marketplace, would be loving to see that in our own portfolios. So we're pretty proud about that, and we're pretty proud about being able to project these results for the, really for the taxpayers of the city. I think many of you know, we created about 18 months ago what we call a closing fund. That is to help us with projects in the city and try to really focus in on projects that are important to us, and we'll complement these dollars with the state of New Mexico where we can. In some cases, we're trying to identify projects that maybe the state is not investing in, but we have this now ability to do so. This closing incentive came about because of the El Paso Electric merger that took place, where they committed $1 million to economic development per year for the next 20 years. It was given to the Community Foundation of Southern New Mexico to determine how to allocate those dollars. They went through a competitive grant system. We actually created this. It was Mavita's vision to create this closing fund because we thought this was a tool that was really desperately needed for us. So we were a recipient of those funds. We do not receive any dollars for managing those funds. We go through the analysis, due diligence, identification of the companies. We go through the analysis of post-performance to make sure what they said they were going to do actually resulted in doing it. And you can see that within Las Cruces specifically, for companies within Las Cruces, should I say, we've awarded about $430,000 in these funds to 5 different projects, nearing over 1,000 new jobs creation that is expected as a result, with over a capital investment of over $60 million. And the average wages of over $25.23. At the top, you'll see who those projects were. Article Cold Management, we put $100,000 into that. Electronic Caregiver, we had Phase 1 and Phase 2. Phase 2 happened already on this side of the fiscal year. So Phase 1 was about 190 jobs, and Phase 2 was the 700 job announcement where we participated with both the City of Las Cruces and the State of New Mexico in funding that next phase of expansion. And we're also, and more recently, we all know about Bitwise Industries. We are putting $100,000 into their effort to grow here, and we've committed those funds already to grow here in Las Cruces. We're trying to move a little bit more aggressively into understanding how we can utilize these funds to assist smaller projects, smaller companies, maybe more entrepreneurial. The challenge we have with that is that this is a post-performance, and sometimes those younger companies, they need the money now, not later. But we're trying to work under a scenario with them where we can get dollars out to them a little bit more quickly, maybe in more tranches than we would some of the other projects. So in that respect, we're working with a company right now called Worthington Farms. We made a commitment of $30,000 to them for the creation of 8 jobs for their $632,000 investment. And there's another company we're working with right now called Backyard Farms that would be locating at the Las Cruces Innovation and Industrial Park. And we're just kind of trying to put the final details on that project. But again, the goal is we want to see how we can distribute these dollars a little bit more effectively so we can support more entrepreneurial and smaller companies as well, as long as they fit the guidelines of what we're trying to establish. I talked a little bit about capacity building, and maybe we can share this for another session, but I would like to talk about we're trying to meet industry demands and changing demands that are taking place post-COVID. One of them is in advanced manufacturing. With advanced manufacturing is a requirement of greater skill sets, but greater wages as well. but we're trying to figure out better ways so we have information available at hand that we can illustrate to companies that we actually have the skill sets in this region to support their advanced manufacturing efforts. So we've been working on an analysis with 2 different consultants on that, trying to bring those that information to the table. We've also been trying to position the region for advanced logistics. Because of the supply chain challenges, we feel we can leverage our existing logistics infrastructure that we have in place to also attract technology and renewables to really become a more efficient location so that we attract logistics operations from all over the country and support the supply chain challenges that we've had in the United States. And finally, I'd like to say, I've been here 14 years now, and I have not felt this amount of collaboration with the city economic development team as I do now. And I think as a result of that, there are some strong discussions that are taking place internally, and as some of you are members of the PRC, you've heard some of the things that are going to be brought out in the near future. And I encourage you to consider what the Economic Development Department will be proposing, because I think what we're trying to do is now come up with tools creatively that will make the Las Cruces Innovation and Industrial Park more competitive going forward. So with that, I'll conclude my presentation and open it up to questions.
Thank you, Davin. Councilor Flores, Councilor Graham.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And thank you, Mr. Lopez, for your presentation and for all your work that you do on behalf of our communities here in Doña Ana County, and especially the city of Las Cruces. And I'm happy to see that a lot of stuff is, not a lot of stuff, a lot of businesses are being located, or will be locating in the innovative industrial park. One of my concerns about that is that, I mean, you showed the averages insofar as the pay and all that, but I know when Saputo presented a couple of years ago, it was clear that there was room for, I guess, upward mobility within the employer's whatever structure, but the pay wasn't all that great. And I mean, and the reason I say great relative to the fact that people need transportation to get out there. And do you have any discussions with, say, our transportation department or anything like that to provide, because we don't have any bus service out there, at least that's my understanding. And people need to get there, and $15 an hour doesn't really provide, I mean, it's not enough to have a car, even maintaining a car and paying for gasoline. So can you answer that question or no? Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Mayor, Councilor, yeah, I mean, it's one of those chicken or the egg kind of questions, right? More money would be dedicated to routes if, the demand was evidenced at that time. Do we have direct conversations with the NMDOT or something regarding that? No. In the past, with the Regional Transit Authority, we've had conversations in terms of how their routes get to the industrial parks for job creation. And I'll be honest, I don't think we have an answer, or we've been given an answer on that. But I think what we're trying to do is 2 things. Number one, for those wages, that'll make it more competitive for people wanting to get to the industrial park, is this whole advanced manufacturing study. That's that upward progression. That if we're able to convince these advanced manufacturers that, again, higher skill sets that are computerization, to CAD, to automation, robotics, they're willing to pay more money. And in many cases in today's atmosphere, they're willing to train, because in the United States today, we are behind in advanced manufacturing. And there's a lot of demand for domestic production to come to the United States right now for various factors. So in most of these cases, they're telling us, look, we understand the skill sets are not there. I mean, we're willing to train the people. We're willing to train them to the wages that they will receive as a result of those extra skill sets. And I think in many cases, if we can push those up to $25, $20, $30 an hour, the transportation side will take care of itself. But again, I will be honest, it's chicken or the egg. But the other aspect of chicken or the egg is infrastructure. Many of these advanced manufacturing projects we're seeing, because they are like, their telecommunication and broadband needs is much greater than traditional manufacturing in the past because they're dealing with computerization. Their electrical needs are much greater in the past. Their wastewater needs are much greater in the past. And that is the other challenge we're dealing with right now, but based on the size of the projects, is trying to address whether we have the infrastructure in place or can deliver it in a time frame that they need.
So you're actually looking at the entire picture. I appreciate that. Thank you, Mr. Lopez. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councilor, thank you.
We have Councilor Graham and then Councilor Coran.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Thank you so much for the presentation, and again, congratulations on the designation from the state. I really appreciate the statistics and metrics you're providing, jobs created, dollars invested, return on investment, and I recognize the importance of those statistics, but I was wondering if you can speak a little bit more to the soft, fuzzy, qualitative side of economic development, because as interested as I, and I'm sure my colleagues are in the dollars and cents of it, at the end of the day, these are initiatives to improve quality of life for the people who live here, and not just those who may necessarily work with the businesses, but can you speak a little bit about those abstract matters of the heart for me?
Mayor and councilors, it's the quality of life question is always challenging. Quality of life is often based in the eye of the beholder, right? As beauty, right? I can't tell you how many times we'll work with companies that we're touring around the area, and maybe they're from the Midwest or something, and they'll say to us, there's not a lot of green here. And that becomes a quality of life issue for them. And then we have two different sets of clients that we work with in terms of industry attraction. We will work with the decision maker, and that decision maker may be moving with the project or may not be moving with the project. If they're not moving with the project, their view of quality of life is public safety, education, and healthcare. That's their vision of quality of life. And we have to rank strongly in those areas if we're going to be competitive with other locations that they're looking at across the country. If it is the person moving with the project, it becomes a completely different discussion. It becomes a completely different type of sales pitch in a way, because now we're catering to understanding their family needs, what they personally value, and we have to try to position those conversations. And many times we can talk about, if they have 2 kids in high school, free college. I mean, that's very appealing in terms of making a decision. But I think overall, and most important, and let me back up. There's one other quality of life we've seen now being quoted by more companies going forward, and that is their ability to tap into renewables. So I do want to address that because that is important, and we've been having a lot of conversations with the county as well as the city as to how we can be a more desirable area to companies because we have a strong portfolio of those renewables that they can tap into. Other than that, that's what but don't get me wrong. I mean, one of the reasons I mentioned the tax base is because I can also tell a company that we're generating tax revenue that is being reinvested into the quality of life for the residents of the area. And let me give you an example of that. It's maybe a little bit older news, but it's still relevant, I believe, in my opinion, is for a long time, we didn't have really an active Main Street. And not having kind of a centralized area was, something that subjectively decision makers would look at and kind of ask why, what's going on. Then for a while, when we had, the federal courthouse being built, the city hall was being built simultaneously. We had cranes in the air around Main Street. And we were talking about, hey, this is progress. You see what's happening here. And I think now we can actually point to a Main Street downtown activity where it's now they can firsthand see community. They can see especially young people, and young people always gets into their mind of workforce, right? So I think those are where we try to really talk about the storyline of quality of life and what it means to them is the investments you can make into the future of the residents here. And of course, that translates to the growth of their company as well.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Coran?
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you very much for the presentation, and I really appreciate hearing the feedback of kind of what we can be thinking about, both in terms of numbers and ideas. So I really appreciate Councilor Graham asking about that. Thank you. I did have a question, or just sort of, I guess, a hope, both as you move forward. It sounds like the initiative with the funding to bridge into smaller businesses is really, that I feel like that's a great idea, and I think I'm hopeful that you can figure out ways to make that work. I do see, though, that the average salary for the small businesses below what we would consider the bare minimum for our, not the federally required minimum, but what we would consider the minimum, quote, livable, although I wouldn't say $15 is livable really for anyone, wage. So I hope that both for you going forward in terms of making those sort of discernments, that the median salary of every sort of initiative that works out in us as a city as we move forward, that when businesses are sort of, I think that I would ask that we set the bar sort of high for them also, and I know that that's a hard ask, but I think it's the economic sort of picture that we're in right now anyway, and so I hope that can also always be part of the conversation, both the average salary or the average wage and then the median salary that might sort of encompass to what Councillor Flores was alluding to, the progression of potential movement upward on the salary track, so that we can see that whole picture and have a good sense of the good paying jobs that we're bringing in versus jobs that might not be enough for people to live on in our community, regardless of, I mean, assuming an ongoing upward trajectory that will just continue to increase. So I would just ask that be part of always our conversations as we think about that. So
Absolutely, Mayor and Councillor. I'll say I think that has been one of the pleasant surprises of this closing fund that we now kind of not control, but we have locally to us. If you look at two of the investments that we put into it, it was electronic caregiver and Bitwise. The state of New Mexico did not put a lead offer to Bitwise, but we chose to do so specifically because, well, two things. Number one, they're providing critical training in a model that employs or provides a wage to that person while they're in training for coding and programming. A lot of times we lose projects for those higher degree levels or higher skill set levels because we're a small population to begin with, and so it's very difficult to sometimes illustrate that we have enough of a certain skill set that is going to meet the company's needs. And a company who's going to put $20, $30, $40 million into a community, they're just not going to make the investment unless it's beyond a shadow of doubt they can fill those positions. No decision maker would want to go back to their board 3 years later and say, we got to close shop. It's career killer probably. So what I like about them is their training, and then they're going to then employ those individuals as well. They don't have to. Those individuals can take their apprenticeship and knowledge and go to the private market as well. But that's one of the reasons why we put dollars into them, even if the state did not, because we felt that was vital to the growth of our community going forward. And we hope to see more of those projects as well. So, thank you.
Well, Devin, I think a lot has been good things have been said. I've known you since you started, 12 years ago, 13 years ago?
Almost 14, Mayor.
14, it's been that long. So you've done a fantastic job. We're very fortunate to have you with the organization. And, I know some years county is beneficial, some years the city is, but all in all, it's good for our whole community, and we appreciate you and your team. This is what a heck of a return of investment that the city has, and so we can't thank you enough for all the hard work you do. And let's just continue to do what you do, and let us know if there's other things that we could help out with. But I think you've got the pretty good handle on things, so just continue doing what you're doing.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, councilors. I appreciate your time today.
Yep.
Thanks.
Okay, so next item is going to be 3.2, legislative update and state funding priorities. Amy Johnson-Basford and Larry Horan will be presenting. And a couple guests from DC, I understand.
Yes, good afternoon, Council.
Mayor Pro Tem's in DC today, so. Did you guys see her crossing in the airplane?
Good afternoon, Council. Amy Johnson Bassford, Grants Manager for the city. Today we are doing the legislative update. We will have both federal and state funding updates for you. It will be somewhat of a lengthy conversation, but we hope that will keep you all entertained. And so our first speaker is John O'Donnell, who is with our federal lobbyist firm, and he will be going over what they have been doing for us and some forward-looking opportunities ahead of us.
Thank you, Amy. Mayor, members of the council, it's good to be with you in person and not looking at a computer screen today and talking with you and looking at my phone and wondering if I'm being proper in the way I look on the screen. So let me start by just introducing a little bit about what our firm is.
Excuse me, sir, I know they introduced you, but can you just, for the record, state your name?
Oh, sure, yes. John O'Donnell, I'm the managing partner of MMO Partners in Washington, D.C. The firm that I work with is, we've done municipal representation for 40 years in Washington. I'm proud to say that our original 4 city clients are still clients of ours 43 years later. And I think that's because we've got a small firm that is able to pivot, track information that is relevant to local government, and have effective relationships with both our clients and federal agencies and Congress. We have had a long history. Those 43 years I mentioned, we've worked with the New Mexico congressional delegation for that long. The kind of projects that we've worked on are for small cities, large cities, medium-sized cities in transportation, public safety, behavioral health, water. And I think that gives us a good background in working with you and the challenges that you have in Las Cruces. I want to focus for a moment on what Congress is dealing with right now, what they have to finish before the end of this first session of Congress. It's the FY23 budget, which is really the appropriations bill. We have a continuing resolution that takes us until December 16th. And the reason I'm mentioning appropriations and this one that's called NDAA, National Defense Authorization Act, is these bills often become vehicles for other legislation that's important to local government and other interests. The WRDA bill is a Water Resources Development Act, which we'll say a little bit more about later. It has some relevance to the city of Las Cruces. And then finally, the public lands package. Congress likes to do these public lands bills, but given the makeup of Congress, the lands bills, recreation, open space, these bills many times have to be attached to one of the 2 bills I mentioned first, the National Defense Authorization or to the appropriations bill, because those are must-pass legislative measures. The Las Cruces federal program, we started a little after what we normally call our cycle of preparing for a federal program this year, because we did not begin working with you until February. And as Councilor Flores heard this morning in the conversation about the state program, you folks really begin your efforts at a state program in October. That's what we normally do. We begin now, and that's why over the next few days we're having conversations with members of the council and the executive staff of the city to work on the program for calendar year 2023. But the program is made up of legislation, which is essentially legislative measures that are important to the city, and the appropriations measures, which in the past 2 years have funded earmark projects. Then there's the congressional federal agency outreach, which is an important part of the program because You can't just develop a program, have a resolution, have project priorities and legislative priorities, and expect Congress or federal agencies to be attracted to them. You really have to go sell them. And we did a little bit of that this year in May when Councilor Apodaca and Andy Hume from Aviation were in town. We met with federal agencies and we met with a congressional delegation to talk about some of the things that were emerging on Las Cruces' federal interests. And then the grant support and technical assistance. That's a part of the program where, as I was speaking to your chief administrative officer earlier, who's been inundated with emails from us about federal programs and opportunities, we do pursue those federal grants, identify them. We send those to Amy Bassford for distribution, and then we follow up. And in some cases, what we wind up doing, whether a grant is successful, more times when it's not, what we do is engage the city with the decision makers in that federal agency who reviewed those grants and maybe found things in the grant that need to be improved in the next round of competition. So that's part of the service that we also offer. The major pieces of legislation we dealt with this year was the American Rescue Plan implementation, its passage, the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, and the most recently, the Inflation Reduction Act, and I mentioned up here again the WRDA bill. I'll let Mr. Pagonis, my associate, talk about the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act passage, but what I'd like to say is that on this legislation, these pieces, as you well know, because everybody wonders, how much money are we going to get from the infrastructure bill? What does the Inflation Reduction Act mean for us? What a lot of our activity is focused on right now is looking at talking with federal agencies about the implementation, and they're getting the grant notices out the door for these programs. And some of that discussion does have to do with the criteria, the eligibility criteria that they're developing. So we'll talk with agency folks about that eligibility criteria to make sure that those resources can be focused on Las Cruces. The specifics of some of what we do is what's up here now, and that is on the appropriations. This year was the second year that Congress did earmarking since 2009. Last year, I think you had submitted maybe 4, and I don't think any of those were funded. This year, we had 8 that were submitted. I consider the first 4 on that list up there the ones that we worked very closely with Ms. Bassford on in terms of getting those to the delegation. I guess it's the bottom 2, Mercia Valley Community of Hope and Mercia Valley Public Housing Authority. We worked with the congressional delegation staff, letting them know that these were projects that were coming from those organizations, but the city was in support of those efforts, the programs. And I would say that the city had a very robust engagement with the congressional delegation staff this year on appropriations. This is a more complex problem, or I shouldn't say problem. This is a more complex effort than it just seems like talking to an elected official about what you think the priority is. There is a lot of behind-the-scenes work that goes on in this, and I won't get into that right now, but if you have questions, we can talk about that further, because the appropriations, we think they're going to continue. We're being optimists about that. We hope they do, and I'll say this. You have not seen in the press anywhere in the country or in the media any discussion about earmarks and them being for foolish ideas. What Congress did in putting guidelines together a year ago, making it for state and local governments and nonprofits, really substantially reduced that risk. So with that, I would like to ask Mr. Pagonis to add some more information about this slide.
Thanks, John. For the record, Kyriakos Pagonis, Vice President with MMO Partners. Mayor, Council, it's a pleasure to be with you today. What John was talking about, the appropriations, just to step back a little bit, we've sort of broken out the funding into two categories. So the discretionary or competitive side, and then your formula funding. Right now, we're talking about sort of competitive funding. Appropriations earmarks are competitive. You are competing in New Mexico and with the rest of the country. Under this slide, we're talking about competitive funding that the agencies release through NOFAs or competitive grant applications. And I'll just say that, coming in, working with Las Cruces has been a real pleasure. There's not oftentimes a system in place. Your grants program officer, Amy, has done an excellent job. Your departments have done an awesome job of going after these opportunities, and I think really reflects the direction the council and mayor have provided. So these were applications submitted this year and maybe even last year, but have been awarded this calendar year. So as you can see, FTA, your transit folks have secured $14 million in competitive funding. The FTA Low Note program is a low emissions program for battery and electric buses. Operations and maintenance facility, you can see the numbers. I won't read them directly, but I will say, when we talk about the infrastructure bill, so that first one is a direct program and funding source from the infrastructure bill that was signed by the president last year. The U.S. DOT RAISE application, this is a program that's been appropriated and funded by Congress over the past several years. It was reauthorized in the infrastructure bill. The city did submit for the first time a $25 million request. It did not get funded, but it was highly recommended. And what that really means is you're on a short list that DOT has said, we recognize the importance of this project. We're going to have another round of funding, probably opening up in the second quarter of next year, and you need to resubmit this project, is basically what they're saying. So while we weren't successful, and I'll say this program, and we've heard from the secretary all the way down, it's probably harder to get a RAISE grant than it is to get into some of the Ivy League schools in the country. So there's so many competitive projects that don't get funded the first go around, but again, being highly recommended, your first time out is a pretty big deal. The National Park Service, Apodaca Park, this project was funded or selected for award back in 2018 through the Outdoor Recreation Legacy Partnership Program. It finally has come together this year. I think, again, that's the testament of your staff, finalizing and going through the process. We played a small role in reaching out to the agency there, but it's nice to see that this has come through. That program in particular will be open every year, so when we're talking about new parks to submit, there will be opportunity to submit additional park applications, and at a much higher level, actually. Congress is really invested in this program, so there'll be higher funding opportunities at I think this year the maximum amount for a project is $5 million. I will say you have to go through the state office to go through the competitive process for this program. And actually, many of the federal programs require that, but in this particular case, you do have to go through the state to go through their vetting process, and then they submit to the National Park Service for national competition. So now we'll talk a little bit about the formula funding that you all receive, and some of it is reflective on an annual basis, but obviously the COVID relief funding is a major piece of that, almost $25 million that the city received through the COVID relief program. 12.4 in the first tranche. The second tranche just came through in May, 12.4 million. One of the things that I think is important to remember on this, this is a one-time sort of funding. We don't expect Congress to continue to do this going down the road, but who knows? But it's probably safe to say that once this money is done, that there probably won't be another round of this. One thing we should keep in mind, though, depending on what happens in November, there could be, some efforts to maybe claw back funding that is not spent So I think if, you're looking at programs and how to get this money spent, I think that's probably a good way to move forward, because again, there may be efforts to claw back any funding that's not spent if things change. Under housing community development, so the first one is your annual Cdbg allocation, $1 million, and then $536,000 for the home program. Both programs are under the HUD, Housing and Urban Development Department. Again, Congress funds these programs through the annual appropriations process. The Cdbg program has been flat over the past couple years, and in fact, I think allocations have come down a little bit because of earmarking. The home program, on the other hand, has seen a little bit of an increase, and I think we'll continue to press Congress to bump up those numbers as they finish up the FY23 appropriations process this year, which right now looks like could go into December. It will go at least until December 16th. I think depending on what happens again in November, that might get pushed into next year, and then who knows. But that's something we're certainly watching and certainly going to be pressing Congress to fund those programs at the highest possible levels. FTA, your urbanized area formula allocation, is $3.8 million for FY22. As you can see, because of the infrastructure bill, that's $1.4 million more than the city received last year under the old FAST Act authorization. So those are formula funds, made available because of the infrastructure's passage. And I think one thing to say about the infrastructure bill, everybody, there is a lot of money through the bill and also through the Inflation Reduction Act. It's going to take time. A lot of the competitive and new programs that were created in those bills are new, so agencies are really working hard to not only get their existing programs and funding out the door, but then standing up brand new programs. So that's just something to think about. These are 5-year programs in the case of the infrastructure bill. The Inflation Reduction Act funding is over a 10-year period. So just to keep that in mind, that if you don't go after something this year, there is time to pursue other funding opportunities down the road. So on the formula side, so the surface transportation formula through the Federal Highway Administration, there are formulas like for the FHWA Surface Transportation Block Grant Program. That program does sub-allocate money to metro areas. In the past, before the infrastructure bill, areas of 200,000 in population or above got a direct sub-allocation, meaning the state DOT had to sub-allocate funds to those areas. The infrastructure bill changed that a little bit, so they added categories between 50,000 and 200,000, and then assigned a sub-allocation number for those areas. They also did it for areas from 5,000 to 50. So New Mexico's allocation for the Surface Transportation Block Grant Program, 50K to 200K, is a little over $10 million, and we're talking to Amy and your MPO about approaching New Mexico DOT about those funds. Again, this is new territory. Every state is now looking at these new allocations a little differently, so that's something we're going to be pursuing. Same with the carbon reduction allocation. So the state has received a bucket of money through the infrastructure bill for the carbon reduction program. There is a sub-allocation for Las Cruces at about $500,000. It's still unclear how the state will distribute that funding, and how does it get to Las Cruces is really the key question. Those are areas we're going to be working with the city and state on as we move forward. The energy efficiency resiliency allocation of $178,000 is for a conservation block grant program that was first funded during the Obama administration. Under that bill, there's about $3 billion appropriated for the program, and Las Cruces did receive a direct allocation similar to the Cdbg program. I think your allocation was about $900,000, so there was only 550, I say only, 500 SDC, $550 million available for this program. So your allocation, again, this is not a quoted number, this is an estimated $178,000 that will come from DOE directly to to the city to do energy efficiency upgrades, weatherization. There's a whole list of activities you can do. With that, I will turn it back over to John.
Thanks, Kyriakis. I'm going to make this quick and wrapping up, because what I have to talk about in closing is the part which I mentioned earlier about the congressional and federal outreach, and then about the technical assistance and grant support. So let me just say this. What we do in Washington with the information we have from you is marketing and sales. That's what we do. It's marketing and sales with the congressional delegation and federal agencies. And a bit of that started this year for Las Cruces when Councilor Abeyta and Andy Hume were in town, because we went to see BLM. We talked with the FAA, we talked with folks at the Department of Agriculture, and we met with the congressional delegation. And that visit was timed serendipitously right after our earmarks requests were in with the congressional delegation. So Councilor Abeyta and myself had an opportunity to talk with the 2 Senate offices, to talk with the other congressional offices. We didn't limit ourselves to CD2. But we had good conversations, and federal agency folks understood what we were trying to do with the airport and what the interest was on the part of the city, especially on the shooting range with BLM property or land. So I just want to mention, it's that sales and marketing, and you folks are a part of that. This morning, a point was made by Larry Horan about showing up in Santa Fe and talking to people. You will hear from, and I say this respectfully, you will hear from members of Congress that you don't need to come to Washington and talk to us. We'll see you in Las Cruces. When you show up in Washington, they know how long a trip it is to go down to El Paso, get on an airplane, go through Dallas, Fort Worth, or Atlanta to get to Washington, and then come back. So you've already proved one point, you have the stomach for doing that. And it's important that you do show up to your ability to do that. And the same is with federal agencies. When Kyriakis is mentioning these programs that got funded, let me tell you, when you walk into a federal agency and you talk to them about a program in Las Cruces, and then they see a grant application, it gives us an opportunity to be a busybody and call those folks and talk with them about, did you get it? And then see where they go with that. You know, it's the schmoozing. But it's important. And then finally, I'd say, and I think the record that we have so far with you shows that we do work on these grants, we do work on these earmarks, and we will provide the technical assistance because that's what we're paid to do. So I want to thank you for your time and attention.
All right, we appreciate that, Mr. O'Donnell. Questions from Councilor Flores and Councilor Bencomo and Councilor Abeyta. Councilor Flores.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Mr. O'Donnell and Mr. Kyriakis. As far as, I'm just curious, as far as the FTA, there was, I think it was page 8, but at any rate, there was reference to ARPA 5307 funds. Where did that go? To whom was that allocated?
Thank you, Mayor, Councilor Flores. So that money for the 5307 additional operating, that was an ARPA fund, and that went for the operations of transit. It'll fund, I believe that it came to council at the last meeting or possibly the one coming up. Sorry, I can't keep them all straight in my head anymore. And that is going for their operations. It is funding them 100%.
When you say they, excuse me, Amy, when you say they, who is they?
I'm sorry, Roadrunner Transit. Okay. For the operations of Roadrunner Transit, it is funded at 100%. That should take them through a year of operations.
Okay, and the reason I was wondering is because this 5307 fund has come up in the SCRTD, and but El Paso gets the money and then deals with the entities, different entities?
El Paso gets a separate allocation. We do get a direct allocation of 5307 annually, which is referenced here on this page, the 3813. That is our annual allocation of 5307 funding. So we do get it direct from FTA annually, and the funding that is handled by the state DOT, New Mexico DOT, is 5339 funding, which is a small amount of funding that can be used for capital and rolling stock.
Great, and that was my next question. How much of the money that's allocated to the state trickles, and I say trickles because that's just been my experience with the state, how much of that trickles to the city of Las Cruces, and what is the mechanism by which it comes, if it does come?
So normally we do receive an annual allocation from the state for 5339 funding from FTA. That is the state administered portion, and like I said, that's used for capital and or rolling stock. We get about 500,000. Yes, Leanne is nodding yes. We get about 500,000. We have a 20% match for that. So that comes down to us annually. What happens is the state receives their appropriation information the same time we receive our 5307. Then they send out a letter saying, you know, do you want this? And we say, yes, we want this. And then we go through the process at the federal level to bring that money into the city.
Thank you so much, Ms. Bassford, and thank you, Mr. O'Donnell, Mr. Kyriakis. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Councilor Bencomo?
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you so much for the presentation and for coming here today to give this presentation, and of course to staff for all the work you do in the background to ensure that, you know, we're being represented. I really appreciate it. I just have a couple questions. With the Elk Trevis update, we were very sad to hear about that at our last TSI PRC meeting, though excited to hear about this highly recommended piece. I'm curious, is there recommendations, changes, updates to the application that would make it stronger? Is that, I see Mr. Cedillo here, if that's for them, but I'm just curious, what can push us over the edge next time there's a round of fundings?
Thank you, Mayor, Councilor Bencomo. We have had a debrief from the USDOT with Public Works, myself, and we also had NMDOT on the call, as well as our consultant that aided us with that application. They did give us several recommendations on areas we can improve in.
Great.
We were highly recommended. They did provide us with the scores. It's either high, medium, or low for the different criteria areas. So we are taking those into consideration. We are pursuing, trying to find out how we can see the level 2 comments. So there's 2 levels when you apply for raise. Your first one is really qualitative. It goes through a process of being reviewed for, you know, the project concept, the design, that type of thing. Level 2, if it gets highly rated in level 1, it goes to level 2, which is where they evaluate our benefit cost analysis that we have to do, which tells them whether or not this project is a good financial project for them. We're hoping to figure out how to get the level 2 information back, and then they have indicated that the program will be released again in late November. So we will be going forward with an application at that time for the project, potentially somewhat redesigned to fit into the current project scope and take their comments into consideration.
Great. This November, Amy?
Yes, this
like
November.
Next month? Wow.
Like next month.
Okay, great. Well, hopefully that just shows the urgency and that cities are ready for this kind of investment, right? So I'm so glad, thank you. And I'm glad that you are all ready and prepared for that. One question, just to clarify, in the COVID relief funding, you mentioned something about a clawback. That made me very nervous, given that we just started the process of disseminating half of that, $11 million, to our nonprofit community. Can you speak more about that?
Sorry if I scared you.
Spend it all now.
I guess I was looking forward in terms of whether, you know, there may be a change next year with congressional makeup. And, you know, one thing that we've kind of heard, depending on what happens in November, is that there could be an effort to try to, recapture funds that have not been spent, not just for this program, but for other programs as well. So it's just nothing to get worried about yet. It's just something that we're thinking about and watching, and certainly will make you all aware of anything that comes up that requires any additional action.
Okay, so originally, I think the date that was set for this ARPA funds was to spend by the end of 2024?
2024, but then you have till 26, I believe.
You don't think that might be honored, depending on what happens in November?
I don't know. I
Okay.
don't know. I just think that.
That's equally terrifying. Thank you, thank you. Okay, I just wanted to make sure and got some clarity.
I wanted to add something to the comments that Amy made about the project, the RAISE project. One of the things that we heard in the debrief, and we've heard this before, is, and I think Las Cruces did this, you were engaged with the New Mexico DOT as you were putting this application together. One of the things that this next round we intend to do is have some of those same conversations with some of the people at Federal Highways in Washington, because one of the things that we're told in these debriefings is, and I'm not saying this was true for the Las Cruces proposal, but if you make assertions about something that this project is going to do this or have this result, and you don't back that up with some facts, and not just something that you put down there, but something that you can cite that there's a study or there's more information, the people who are reviewing simply they're not paid to do that research for you, so they don't do it. And that's what can lead to a lower score. So I think, back to, again, something we heard this morning in the discussion, is you should also make sure that the congressional delegation, their staff here locally, and when you can get a member, that they understand as much as you can get into the details and give them how this project is going to benefit, what it's going to do about jobs or mobility or address climate issues. Those things need to be addressed when you're talking to them, and do it with their staffs. I'll say this, we've heard this from several federal agency people. You think that we get bored hearing the same story over and over? No, because what you're doing is convincing us that you know what you're doing. So I would just leave that thought with you.
I imagine that Amy and David, they all know this, right? You're paying attention, David? Okay, just kidding. They're on it. I know they are.
Absolutely.
That's really great.
Yeah.
Though equally frustrating, because I think they also did not want to fund an incredible big research project that we had for major intersections in the city. So but we did communicate that to our staff, our Senator Heinrich staff, around the frustration around like shovel-ready projects, or when we have ideas for other really big, important projects as well.
Counselor, you hit on an important point. Sometimes when
Mr. O'Donnell, can you talk into the mic, please?
Sure. Sometimes when we think about these projects being presented to the congressional delegation, they have other people presenting from New Mexico to them also. So that competition is not just nationally for local governments, it's local. And this go-round, I think it maybe was this go-round and the one before, I think the Facebook project in, I believe it's Las Lunas, did well, high tech. So there are so many factors that, you almost have to have one of these, I forget what they call it in the military, but you almost have to have this session where you just say to yourselves, where are we the weakest? And how do we strengthen ourselves?
Thank you. That's great feedback. My last question, on page 9, you talked about, I was unclear, I was hoping you could clarify, some of the transportation money, you said that you spoke with MPO and you're going to be talking to DOT about some of these funds. So some of these funds were earmarked, specifically Las Cruces is getting a set of funds, but we still have to go advocate at the state level to receive them, or?
So, good question. So the first program there, the FHWA Surface Transportation Block Grant Program, has been funded over the past decade. Prior to this infrastructure bill, areas of 200,000 in population and over got a direct sub-allocation. So from FHWA to the state, and then based on population to that local area. This bill, the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, said, okay, we're keeping that, but then we're adding these other 3 categories, so 5,000 to 50, 50 to 200, et cetera. So based on that, New Mexico got an allocation of about a little over 10 million for those areas of 50,000 in population to 200,000. Because it's new, the state is now working through its process, and we talking to Amy and the MPO about reaching out to New Mexico DOT to be part of that process, because they do have this allocation, and you have to work with them to make sure that this area is represented when that funding gets distributed.
Okay, and is it similar, well, I'll let Amy, I think she has something to add, and I'll ask my follow-up.
Thank you, Mayor. Councilor Bencomo. So we have been in conversations with MPO and MDOT, and some of these things are brand new to them. So they're struggling to figure out how to distribute it. The funding is not specific to the city of Las Cruces. It's for the Las Cruces metropolitan area, which does include areas outside the city limits. So it's possible that Mercia, the county, and the city would all be putting in applications to DOT for that money, for that $500,000, correct.
Okay.
So the way that we think that they will do it is much like the project we brought forward, where we went and we wanted to have the study of the pedestrian mitigation. So they're going to put out calls for projects. We'll submit our project along with the other entities that are in the metropolitan area, and then it will get evaluated by DOT. Now, because they have an allocation that they're required to give money to the Las Cruces area, we have a better chance of getting funding than for like the one we did, which was a statewide call, and was the entire state distributing money. So we're not sure exactly how New Mexico DOT will run out each of these programs, and that's why we're working with MPO. Most likely it'll come through the MPO.
Okay.
Okay.
And one last question, Amy. For this, do you think they also are going to be looking for shovel-ready projects, or is
Yes.
this an opportunity for the study?
We
Okay.
can do, they usually break it up between study and capital.
Okay.
So they'll have a certain amount that they'll put towards study or feasibility studies, engineering studies, design work. That's kind of one broad category, and then the other will be capital. The capital is looking for shovel-ready, and usually New Mexico DOT gives us about 2 to 4 years to implement any project they give us. So even our TAP funds or our MAP funds, those are all under like a 2-year deadline that we have. So it still has to be really shovel-ready.
Okay.
Even if we're going to do a study, we have to be ready to go out for it, know our scope,
Okay.
that type of thing.
Okay, thank you so much.
One thing I'm going to add on the planning side, a lot of these competitive funding, so like the RAISE grant program had planning carved out, right? So a lot of these new programs also fund planning. And it's something we've talked to Amy about and are certainly watching. So there's certainly opportunity on the planning side as well to get competitive funding.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Abeta?
Thank you, Mayor. And thank you, Mr. O'Donnell and Mr. Pagonias, not only for coming today, but for your hospitality while Andy and I were in DC earlier this year. I do want to say that it was very helpful. I know I was going originally to be part of another group, and so we decided to maximize our time while we were up there. And so scheduling those meetings was very helpful, and you had Andy and I running back and forth a lot of places. So I really appreciate that and the work that you've done. I only have one question, and it's for Amy. So as we are increasing not only your regularly scheduled grants, but looking at these new opportunities, how are we doing capacity-wise internally to be able to put out strong applications?
That's a great question, Mayor, Councilor Abeta. There are 2 parts of capacity I want to talk about. First is the capacity of the grants office to produce these grants. We are increasing our staff, adding on an additional person, as well as being the section that handles the contract person for ARPA. That person will also work on some of our other grant opportunities as allowed by ARPA final rule guidelines. So we are going to actually have 2 additional staff members. We do have a couple of consultants on call as well that helps us get these things out. Many of the departments, I'm happy to say, are now much more grant savvy than they have been in the past. So they are much more willing to jump in and help with various areas of the grant development process, and that is very helpful. Capacity-wise, in the other sense, is what can the departments do? What is their capacity level for handling new projects? And that's an internal discussion that really needs to be had with the city manager's office. There are some areas that they are at capacity with getting new projects. But we continue to go for grants because we know the end benefit is a greater benefit to our community, to the citizens of our city. And so those are kind of discussions that departments need to have with their ACMs and the city manager's office to ensure that they have the capacity to implement not only these federal monies, but the state monies that we are getting, because we are seeing a lot more opportunities at the state level as well. And they have a load that is pretty phenomenal in just doing grant work, plus the work that the city asks them to do regularly. So I would defer to those department heads and their conversations with the city manager's office on that answer.
Okay, thank you so much. That's very insightful, and something to think about as we're going for some of these large projects, and with a lot of them with timelines and deadlines, I want us to be cautious. So thank you, and thank you, Mayor.
Okay, thank you, and thank you for that presentation. Welcome aboard, and I think you'll be able to do a lot of great things for our community, so thanks.
They aren't going away. We can ask them more questions at the end if you would like, but we're going to now shift to our state funding. And I will have Larry Haran, our city lobbyist, come up first and discuss the upcoming session and some trends and some other information. And then I will go into our projects that we've identified for this coming legislative session.
Thanks, Amy. Mayor, members of the council, Larry Haran, lobbyist, state lobbyist for the city of Las Cruces. And not to terrify you, Councilor Bencomo, but I can tell you with certainty if we hit an economic downturn, the state will claw back money because they've done it to us in the past, although I think we've been pretty successful because the city of Las Cruces makes sure that you spend your money well. But that definitely is a threat at the state level, because what we do know is, and as we go into the 60-day session, which will start on the third Tuesday in January, we're going to have a whole bunch of new members of the House of Representatives. Depending on what happens, we could have a new executive because of the governor's race, although the recent polling and the latest polling indicates that Governor Michelle Lujan Grisham is still leading going into the election. The last poll will be released, the Brian Sanderoff Albuquerque Journal poll will be released on October 30th. That typically is the closest to the actual numbers, but early voting starts soon, so that's really what's on the mind of the legislators and also the executive right now. But going into this session, we don't need to worry about clawbacks unless we have another pandemic, because we have record revenue levels forecasted. The state right now is at about between 30 and 40% of reserves for the current fiscal year. They had an additional $100 million in new money at the last revenue projection, which was in August for this current fiscal year. They're projecting $2.5 billion in new recurring revenues for the next fiscal year, which starts next July 1st. And that's $2.5 billion out of a budget that's about 10. So it's a significant increase in revenue. So what they will be focusing a lot on, I'm hearing lots of different things, but they're going to be focused on how to spend that money, where to sock it away, and how to spend it in a way that you're not jeopardizing future recurring revenue streams. Because oil is responsible for 40% or even a little more, oil and natural gas, of the state's budget. As we know, it's cyclical. If we have a downturn, that's when they'll come and they'll be looking for either ways to claw back, or they'll sock away money in rainy day funds or reserve funds so that they can use it for operational expenses. As far as legislation to watch, the one that always makes me nervous is anytime they talk about tax reform, and they are having significant discussions on tax reform going into this session. The reason they want to do it now is because with these kind of revenue levels, the state can absorb revenue losses that typically come from tax reform. But whenever we talk about tax reform, that also means they're going to be looking at gross receipts tax, which means there'll be discussions on food tax, our hold harmless payments, There also could be some discussion and changes as far as what's destination sourcing for gross receipts tax. Destination sourcing is the change to the tax code that they passed in order to capture internet sales gross receipts tax. Some unanticipated problems have arisen because of passage of that piece of legislation. There haven't been any negative impacts that I'm aware of at the city of Las Cruces, but some of the municipalities, particularly in the oil patch, lost revenue because they have service providers who are performing work in the county while their offices are within a city. And so that they had a significant revenue impact for some cities, Carlsbad and Hobbs in particular. Again, there will be some discussion on law enforcement reform as we go into this session. There was significant, I think we've talked for the past couple years about different pieces of law enforcement reform, and some passed in this previous session, but we'll see some of that again coming in the 60-day session. And I appreciate Mr. O'Donnell, and when he's quoting this morning is when we had our meeting with nonprofits and community groups to talk to them about capital outlay and have discussions about advocacy both at the city and the state level. And the role of counselors and staff during session, when you show up, it matters. It matters now when you're meeting with your legislators, but when you go see them in Santa Fe, even if you only get to see them for a few minutes, it matters that you've made that effort, and it helps staff, and it helps me make the pitch for all of the projects that we're working on. So this year we did things a little bit differently. You'll recall we started individual meetings with myself, city manager, Amy, and council to find out what your priorities are and what you feel like it is important for us to fund. What we did a little bit differently is we tried to incorporate Lift Up Las Cruces in our capital outlay requests with legislators. What Lift Up provides is an opportunity to tell a story and have a very laser-like focus on a particular area in the community that we can pitch to legislators to try and get support for capital outlay funding. So we wanted to identify capital outlay projects that carried the message and carried the projects of Lift Up Las Cruces. And the other thing we wanted to do, and we're always trying to streamline and also improve our process with capital outlay, is we took your input and then we went to the legislators and said, why don't you tell us what you would like to fund? Instead of us giving them a list and saying, here's our projects and make an argument, tell us what you like to, what types of things you like to fund, and what would you like to see come before you. As you can imagine, with a variety of individuals, we got a variety of different responses, but they appreciated being asked. And so when you see the list, what we tried to do this year, rather than just taking what was the priority of the city or staff, is meld what your priorities are as a council with the input we receive from legislators to try and come up with a better list, because it is competitive. Even though they're anticipating up to $1 billion in funding from capital outlay, if you have $1 billion in funding, you're going to have $10 billion in requests. If you have $1 million in funding, you're going to have $10 million in requests. So no matter what, you're still competing against other communities and others throughout the state. So we tried to be more focused on legislators' priorities as we came up with our capital outlay list. And those discussions continue to be ongoing because it evolves as we get closer to the session and we start to have a better outlook on how much money is going to be available. That can change. And so we have a list that's pretty broad, a lot of basic infrastructure needs, specifics for Lift Up Las Cruces for projects, and also specific projects asked for by the legislators. And so as we get closer to the session, if you have the opportunity, please come to Santa Fe, and whenever you do, we can connect, and we'll connect you with the legislators, because it may seem simple. You find the Capitol, you can find them, they can be pretty slippery. So we have tricks to help you connect with them. So whenever you're there, please reach out and we'll help you make connection. And that's not just for capital priorities, that's also for policy issues. So if we have policy issues that we need help on, I'll work through the city manager's office to identify if council and staff can be helpful, because it's also very important as other elected officials, but people who are elected hear from each other. It has a different impact than if you hear from staff or people like me during the session.
Thank you, Larry. Okay, I think I go through these slides every single year for you on project selection, and this year we did our strategic planning a little differently on how we selected it, so that's what you'll see in the projects. But the considerations for the selection of the projects are exactly the same as they've always been. We need to look at, first of all, is it on the state-approved ICIP? And this morning we had a community workshop for community groups, individual organizations looking to have us be their fiscal agent. That will be online on our website by the end of this week. I'd encourage you, if you have time, to watch it. It's about 2 hours long with the questions, but really about an hour for the total presentation. And we really stressed, if it is not on the ICIP, it doesn't get funded. And if we don't submit it as a project priority, it won't get funded. So they're making it a little more streamlined as far as the random asks during this legislative session. It also does kind of restrict us a little bit to being really flexible during the session on what projects we want to have funded. So good and bad, both sides of the coin there. So first of all, it's on the state ICIP. As you know, we have a CIP manager now. We have a CIP analyst. Those folks are going to start working on the CIP for the 24 fiscal year here in a few weeks, so be aware of that. Our process of selecting projects for the state legislative capital outlay kind of coincides with it, so it does get a little confusing, but hopefully we've separated it by a few weeks at least. So then we look at project readiness. Is it ready to go, shovel ready, as you would say, whether that's a planning for equipment or for major capital. There are requirements, since most of it is paid for through severance tax bond sales. There are requirements that we have to obligate 5% of that award within 6 months of that bond sale. And as you've noticed in the last couple work sessions, I've brought a bunch of the legislative appropriation grant agreements from 22 just in the last month. I think we'll do the final ones maybe on Monday, next Monday, we'll do the final ones, or maybe even into November. So the sale of the bonds are done in June, so we have a very short window of time to get that funding obligated once we get the agreements, and you all accept it into the budget. So it has to be a project that's ready to go. We're looking at what is the amount of funding required to complete the project. Are we completing a project? Are we starting a new project? What funding have we put into it? What funding is the city willing to put into it? Because the legislators do look at that as well. They don't want to fund 100% of any project, I think. And that's true of almost every funder we have, federal, state, even local foundations. They don't want to be funding 100%. They want to see what we have put in. Can the project be phased? Larry asked me this 20 times during the legislative session, if not every single day of the legislative session. If he goes to a lobbyist or a legislator and we're asking for $500,000, they're going to ask, well, if I give you 150, what can you get done with it? If I give you $500,000, what can you do with that of a $2 million project? So we need to look at how it can be phased. Then does it align with the city's strategic plan, which of course is Elevate? We want to always make sure it aligns with that. Most of the things that we're presenting today do. Almost all of our long-term projects align with Elevate because they are basic needs of the city. Streets, sewers, utilities, all of those are the basic needs of the city that the city is required to provide to the community. So those are always going to align with our strategic plans. And then, of course, it must be a capital improvement with a life of at least 10 years, with the exception of public safety equipment. Public safety is the only area where we can ask for equipment and vehicles. With a limited amount of exception for senior programs, but they have a whole different process of getting capital outlay. That's a whole different ball of wax. Okay, so I want to get into some of the projects. So airport improvements, Larry didn't talk much about this, but you can certainly ask him questions about this. The Municipal League is looking to do an appropriation bill? An appropriation bill, sorry I said allocation bill, but an appropriation bill to provide $170 million to the state for municipal airports. and that is to do capital improvements at the airport. So we're looking to do a request through that process of about $15.2 million, and that will get us ready to go with for interstate travel. Okay, so that gets us some of the critical things we need at the airport, including the retrofitting of the existing buildings for passenger service, a parking lot expansion, which includes some solar to help provide energy to the airport, a new maintenance facility with a fuel farm, the relocation of the existing fuel farm and an expansion of it to assist with those service, passenger service and commercial service, and a water tank rehabilitation and replacement. This benefits both the airport and the industrial park. That tank is probably one of the oldest that we have and is in desperate need of rehabilitation. Once they look at it, it could need total replacement, so we're putting in some funding for that to ensure we have a good water source out in the West Mesa. Sewer and utilities projects. This is our ongoing septic tank replacement project. This is where we're running sewer lines into neighborhoods where they don't have access to sewer and are on septic tanks. These are established based on priorities established by the Utilities Department in 2008. Much of that has been directed through state law regarding replacement of septic tanks and whether they allow it or not. And so that is partly how they determined what were the priority areas. The funding we're asking for this year will help provide sewer to Brittany Estates and Estados Serranos. I don't think I said that right, but I apologize. Our roadway improvements, some of these are our standards that we see year after year, the East Mesa roads and drainage improvements, continued improvements of those roadways and drainage out there on the East Mesa. The Telshore Spruce intersection, this is the funding we need to finish that project. We received partial funding last year. We're going to be asking for the remaining funding needed this year. And then University Avenue, this was at the request of one of our legislators to evaluate the street between Espina and El Paseo for additional pedestrian mitigations and safety measures. So this is a very small ask for a study of that area. As you know, when we put in some kind of pedestrian safety, we do have to do studies to ensure that it's warranted based on the other measures that are available on that roadway. For Lift Up Las Cruces, we are the current Lift Up location is, as you know, a section of the community bordered by Spruce, Solano, Madrid, and kind of cuts through the neighborhood there to the east. Not a lot of city-owned facilities in that particular neighborhood, so we focus primarily on roadway improvements this year. We're doing a street lighting improvement that will help provide lighting throughout the lift-up area. And then we have two potential opportunities for roadway improvements. One is a sidewalk ADA improvements project, and the other is partial reconstruction of Sacramento Street. And then under public safety, our legislators do always fund our public safety requests, and so we wanted to make sure we included those on the list. We have police equipment. This is the replacement of existing body cameras. As I said earlier, this is one of the exceptions where they will fund small equipment for public safety. And then we have for fire stations, we have improvements to multiple fire stations for things that have not been updated in a while. These are existing stations, number 4 and 5, for fencing and security gates. Number 4 for a restroom remodel. I think one of you indicated you'd been in that restroom and it's desperate need of remodel. Station 2 needs a remodel of their bay area for their apparatus. Station 6 has some significant stucco issues and needs to have exterior stucco repair that will help ensure energy efficiency at that particular station. And Station 5 needs a new bay entrance, aprons, and parking lot. Those apparatus, given the weight of them, do kind of tear apart the aprons and entrances to the bay area. So that's something that needs to be redone on a regular basis. And then for park improvements, These are not only things that you all have talked about, but that the legislators talked about as well. Gomez Park, you all were presented with the master plan for Gomez Park, I think late August. And so this is to begin the process of working on Gomez Park. This is a parking lot, will include complete design and construction of the parking area, making it ADA compliant for the park. And then Pioneer Park, is to complete the renovation of the historic gazebo and provide additional infrastructure around the gazebo and the new plaza area. All right, and that is the end of our projects. I will stand for questions. I have representatives from each of the departments that can also answer questions.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Beta.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. And thank you, Amy. If we could go back to slide 20, please. Thank you. I did want to ask a couple questions about Gomez Park. I know I talked extensively about it. And Phase A in total was going to be right under $2 million. The portion that you have pulled out here for the parking lot, do you have an estimate of what this would cost?
Yes, thank you, Mayor, Councilor Abeyta. I have gotten with Public Works, and we have revised the estimate for the parking lot. It will be $400,000 for the parking area alone.
Okay. And one of the first items that was on this Phase A was for was to do some takedown of stuff and a redesign. The parking lot very much needed and necessary. I'm curious, how much additional would we need for Pioneer Park's gazebo? Because I do recall we did just ask for another amount for that as well. So what would be the cost that we're asking again for the gazebo?
So yes, Pioneer Park, I'm sorry, Mayor, Councilor Beta, Pioneer Park has had significant amount of funding put forward. It is a very large project to renovate it to the master plan that was provided. Right now we have funding to begin the utility works there and some of the base infrastructure that needs to be done to do the rest of the improvements. We are going for a grant for $500,000. I'm looking at Kathy because I can't remember if it's 500,000 total or if it's 505. I believe it's going to be a total of $1 million the project would receive. That is to do the hardscapes at the park. And then we are asking for an additional $660,000 to finish the historic gazebo, the trellises that will be on each side of the gazebo to create walkways, and then the seating and additional infrastructure right around the plaza area so they can have events and seating and that type of thing. Kathy wants to add anything? No, that's great. Okay, so that would get us through the design of the gazebo and finish Phase 1 and get us a couple projects into Phase 2 if we receive this amount of funding.
Okay.
Okay?
Thank you. And just as I think I say this every time when I talk about Tony Gomez Park and Friender Park, when we look at equity, when we look at the different districts, I have to say District 2 has not had projects come up. And this is an area that needs significant assistance. I just got done with my public safety meeting. The areas of most concern and that have had the most problems are right around this area. It's a critical need for revitalization. This is the start of that. And so I am going to be heavily advocating for lots of phases for this park, and I'm very glad to see it on this list, but, and the parking lot is a great start, but I mean, the playground is already out of expiration and things like that, so I know that I think it's going to take just a significant amount, so that's just one area on that. I am happy to see items for the airport improvements, roadways. I am curious about the university roadway improvement for the I'm very happy to see a study and plan for pedestrian and safety measures. Was there something specific that the individual was wanting to see on that?
Yes, thank you, Mayor, Councilor Abeyta. This particular legislator brought up that they would like to see an additional hawk system on University Avenue in the section between Espina and El Paseo. The first step in a hawk system or any kind of pedestrian mitigation is to conduct a study to see if the mitigation that we're thinking of would be warranted and where in that block it would be warranted. That one's a little bit challenging as I talk to our streets administrator because there are entrances to parking lots along there, and we want to be careful of, putting it in a place where it won't be used and that they're still jaywalking. We want to put it in a place where people are going to actually use it. So that's the first step. This is a very small request of only $50,000 to get that study and initial design work done if it's warranted. And if it's warranted, then we might go back and ask for additional funding to actually put in the hawk system, which costs about $300,000 to $400,000. But if it's not warranted, we aren't holding on to money that we can't spend.
Okay, thank you very much, and thank you, Mayor.
Mayor, Councilor Abeyta, one other thing, we are doing some additional improvements at Gomez Park through the lighting that we have from the parks a couple of years ago from our parks improvements. So there will be some lighting work done in the next 6 to 8 months. Out at Gomez Park, and then we will begin to look for funding opportunities for additional improvements there beyond the parking area. We can also look for to increase the amount of our request if you would like us to.
Thank you, and thank you for mentioning about the lighting. I know that's been something that's been on the list for a while, so there hasn't been any kind of new projects within that. Yeah, no new projects within the park. So I obviously would love to advocate for more to be requested for that area, but thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Flores?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you again, Amy. So I'm looking at, fortunately, it's on page 17, East Mesa roads and drainage improvements and septic and all that. What's the status on that? It sounded last year, or when was it? Yeah, going on a year now, as if that was almost finished. Does Adrian know?
I would defer to either David or Tony
and
from
she's
Public
pointing
Works,
at somebody else.
and then, Carl can discuss the septic
Carl.
systems.
Yeah, I would like to know exactly what the status is. It looks like there's still, it looked like a done deal. I mean, it looked like it was going to be done. But based on this, it looks like we still need allocations.
Correct. So good afternoon, Mayor, Councilor Flores, Tony Trevino with Public Works for the record. You are correct. We have been working on the East Mesa. Cortez Avenue is the segment that we're working on. It's currently being surveyed, and we'll be hiring a consultant to get this design done here in the next couple months. This was a large portion of a roadway. It's going to require, it's a collector. It's one of the wider streets out there. That is a major function for our drainage. So this is a little more expensive than some of the smaller streets, but it's under design, and this will help finish the construction of it.
So when I hear the word design, it sounds to me that there's nothing happening except somebody drawing something about how it's going to get done.
So, Mayor,
so when does it get out of that, quote, design stage, and why does it take so long?
Mayor, Councilor Flores, I'm an engineer, so I do design. So that is kind of how I get paid. But it's probably about a 6 to 8 month process. The survey has been taking quite some time. Again, this was additional legislative funding that came above our regular CIP projects. So we had to hire a consultant to kind of keep this going in addition with all our other projects so nothing falls behind. So we're hoping the design's done here probably by the spring of this year and not for construction by the summer of 2023.
So by then I'll be at least a year older. So, I mean, and I don't mean to in any way say, oh, you know, what's going on? What are you not doing? Why hasn't it Why hasn't it gotten done or been completed? So then, tied to that is also the septic issue. And have the septic tanks been removed, and have the water lines been installed, or you can't do it until, yeah, you can do that now and then you can put the roads in, right? Yes?
Mayor, Councilor Flores, Tony Trevino again. Those are two different areas. The Cortez section that we're doing is just a new main, and we're going to be tying into some areas that utilities and Carl Clark's projects have already done, and we're going to go and tie into those and make those a complete sewer system.
Okay.
So they're two different projects.
Yeah, I know that, okay. I know there's two different steps, but there's actually different projects, and Cortez is one street, and what's the other, Mr. Clark?
Mayor, Councilor, Carl Clark, Deputy Director of Environmental Technical Support with Las Cruces Utilities. Those projects, the Hacienda Negra projects, are already completed. The funding that we received for that, Avenida del Sol, Calle Ranchero, those just got completed. There's still some remaining streets to the east of that. We don't have funding to move forward with the design aspect on it, but we have talked to Public Works in regards to the remaining sewer lines that we need there. We did receive additional funding, but that's going to Brittany Estates, Estados Serenos area.
So, Mr. Clark, do you see, like maybe within our respective lifetimes, that those septic tanks will be removed and replaced with water lines?
With sewer mains, yes, I think that as long as we continue to keep getting funding to the level we've been getting it from the state, we'll continue down the road with that.
Okay, so when I speak with Larry, I should still be asking for money for the East Mesa.
Yes.
That's a big concern. It's been my concern since before I was elected, when I was campaigning out there. I was unpleasantly surprised to see that that was an issue, and the roads out there. So it's really, when we're talking about capital outlay, we're still asking for roads. And I mentioned earlier, maybe this morning, I can't remember, but that I was on Mulberry Street. And, the things you'll see on Mulberry Street, according to Dr. Seuss. Well, thank goodness Dr. Seuss wasn't on that street, because it is in horrible, horrible, horrible disrepair. And the machine that was supposed to fix it broke down. And there are a lot of elderly people on that street. And it isn't as if they can, and then for safety reasons, they can't park their car away. They can't really access their driveways, and it's appalling. I mean, that's District 1, and it really doesn't matter what district we live in. It's all of our constituents, it's all of our people. So what happened, and the machine, one lady told me that machine that broke down, that tears up everything, and all you get is rocks and, blocks of pavement, kind of like runway 422 up out in the airport. And my concern is, of course, the safety, first and foremost, the safety of the people that live there. And I think about children riding their bikes and that thing, getting on their tires and then kicking up and maybe hitting the back of their heads or something. And then the second part is liability. I mean, we have to do something, Mr. Peely, about that. And I don't know, it looks like money has been allocated for that repair, but I saw where it had been repaired, and with the rains we've had, it's already coming apart. So, David, you don't want to talk to me? You're hurting my feelings. You're running away from me. Don't do that. But seriously, I think all of us worry about safety more than anything in the world. But to be creating a hazard, ooh la la, I don't understand that part. And so what do you have to, I told the lady that I would be speaking up. I didn't realize I'd be speaking up here at this point, but it's very timely. So it seems like we're always asking for CIP money for roads, and then our roads are, in horrible, horrible, horrible shape. And I invite you to, anybody who on staff to go look at Mulberry Street, where they're replacing the road. But honestly, with the rains that have come down, even the parts that have already been redone, have ruts. You know, they're not as horrible and falling apart, but how long, anyway.
So, good afternoon, Mayor, Councilor Flores, David Cedillo, Public Works Director. And yes, we did respond to Ms. Hernandez's concern that came through the mayor over to us over the weekend. You're correct. The contractor did have a piece of equipment that did become inoperable based on some items that broke on the machine. They have been working to get those up. They have 2 machines, both of them broke down. They did repair one of them. They should be out there today. So as part of what is the contractor, what are we doing as part of those? So with the rains that happened on Friday evening, the contractor went back out and placed material so that people can actually access onto their driveways and into their properties.
Were they supposed to do that, Mr. Cedillo? When?
So the contractor did that after the rains on Friday evening. So they went back out there in the evening and placed millings. We have some photographs based on what that happened out in the field.
And so you don't believe me when I tell you that I was there yesterday, and I mean, I don't know how she gets her car into her driveway. She doesn't have an option. She's going to ruin her car probably. So, sorry for interrupting.
No, not a problem. We can definitely have staff go back out and take a look at that. There were several driveways that were addressed. Again, this is over the weekend, so if with the people driving in and out, if that is being pushed to the side, we can have staff go back out there and reevaluate that. And we do understand this is a pavement replacement project, so they do replace or they do remove the entire asphalt section of it. Yes, it is unfortunate that their machines broke during their operations. Some of these things the contractor can avoid, sometimes they can't. So what we try to do is make sure that the contractor addresses those things as best possible with the situations that we have. Again, we will have staff go back out there, evaluate all of those driveways, and have those communications with each of those residents. They do get a notice, and it does have not only the contractor's information, but it should have our project manager's information on it. So they do have points of contact to reach out to. At any point in time, throughout weekends, evenings, there's a contact number that is supplied to them as part of those communications. If not, then I would like to know to ensure that staff is making sure that the contractors are providing those. But staff is very good about ensuring that those communications are sent out.
Yeah, I'm sure, and I think that this lady or this other lady that I spoke with contacted the mayor, and maybe Mayor Pro Tem, because that's her district. But
you're correct, Councilor Flores, and I believe that was Ms. Hernandez.
No, it was actually another lady too. But I don't have, I wrote down her name, it's in my car. So why are those machines still sitting there after 2 weeks? I mean, they broke down over 2 weeks ago now. So are they going to be repaired? Do you have any time estimate? Can you contact the contractor and allay the concerns of the residents there? Because it's a long stretch there on Mulberry.
Councilor Flores, yes, the contractor did let us know that one of them was repaired and is mobilizing back today to continue the work. And I believe that was in my correspondence back to Ms.
Oh, okay, great. Well, thank you so much, Mr. Cedillo, and I'm sorry I'm always complaining and belly aching, but I really feel for our constituents. So.
No, ma'am, you're welcome. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Councilor Bencomo.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you so much, Amy, and Larry, of course. This list feels even different than prior lists, right? It doesn't feel so like we need to arm wrestle each other for what we want on our top 5 or whatever. It feels like, maybe, like projects will get done and the community will see those get done. Will you tell us which legislators you were able to speak with?
Yes, I will defer to Larry to give you the list because he probably has it on the top of his head.
Thank you, Mayor. Councilor Bencomo. I'll have to go back. So Representative Rubio, we were unable to meet with. because she had been out of town, so she's still on the list to follow up with. Senator Steinborn is on the, we need to follow up with him, and Senator Cervantes. Other than that, we had Senator Souls, Senator Hamlin, Representative Ferrari, Representative Small, Representative Cadena. I think that's it.
Okay. And you, what are you waiting for?
I'm just looking, I look for everybody else who's in the meeting just to confirm, because
Okay, good.
I think that's right. So we still have a few that we need to follow up with.
Okay. Okay, so
And
you
then
will
there's-
do that. You,
Madrid, how about Willie Madrid?
no, they're only meeting with people who represent Las Cruces.
Yeah, Willie Madrid represents Las Cruces.
Oh,
Mayor and Councilor Flores, no, we have not met with Representative Madrid. And then some of the others, like you have Senator Diamond, who has a very small piece, and I'm not sure she even does in redistricting. So some of those we don't typically get funding from them.
okay. Okay. So you do have plans still to continue to follow up with the ones that you have not spoken with?
Mayor and Councilman Como, that's correct, yes.
Great,
absolutely.
thank you, Larry. I was absolutely very glad to see Gomez Park on here. I'm curious and I know we briefly spoke about this in our meeting, Amy, and will you remind myself and the public, given that during a work session here several months ago, we talked about 3 parks, Gomez Park, Brannigan, and Franger Park, and I'm curious about where the other 2 stand. If they're not on this list, how we're going to try to get funding for those phases.
Thank you, Mayor, Councilor Bencomo. So I have, on Brannigan Park, we have submitted a request to the New Mexico Department of Finance and Administration for a grant opportunity they put out for recreational areas. We are asking for $3.2 million to do the bulk of the projects through Phase 1 and Phase 2. Phase 3, where we have a recreational facility planned, may not happen due to the purchase of most of the land that we were looking at. So Phase 3 may not happen on that particular park, but we're looking at the integral parts of Phase 1 and 2 with that funding, and hopefully we will receive a positive response soon from DFA about that particular park. Franger Park and Gomez Park are things that we do have to work on. We need to get them onto the ICIP as opposed to just the CIP, so that's a process that we will go through this session, this CIP process that'll start in a couple weeks, and making sure they're on the ICIP so we can go for capital funding. We did have to add Gomez Park to it as a special request to the state and get permission from them to add Gomez Park on for just the parking area for this year. We can look at funding additional, requesting additional funds for Gomez Park to potentially do some of the design work that needs to be done based on the master plan. We know that the parking area, we have full confidence that the parking area will be funded by one of the legislators. We do not have a commitment that the rest of it will be funded by any legislator. So again, we're looking at what legislators came back to us and said we'll fund. Some of these are smaller projects, but we still have our large projects in there. So we're looking to kind of tailor them for what the legislators said they were interested in funding. Franger Park and Gomez Park both have some priorities with the Parks Department, and we will look at additional opportunities for funding through federal programs, which is the Land and Water Conservation Fund. Both of those parks are currently, though, retainage ponding areas, so we do have to work with Public Works on how that can be, whether or not that can actually be committed for land and water conservation. There are some issues with that, because once you commit to land and water conservation, you're committing in perpetuity that that will always be a recreation area. If for some reason we get some issues that are happening in that area and Public Works has to take it back as only a retainage pond and not have a dual purpose of also a park, we would run into issues with that funder. So our best funding source is the state for those 2 particular parks, so that we can keep it available to provide both purposes for the city residents. So those are things that we will look for state funding for over the next year. Somebody asked about our capacity issues. I think Parks is probably one of those departments that are experiencing some capacity issues for their projects. And so we have to be cognizant of what each of those departments can get done in the time period given for funding.
Okay. Thank you so much, Amy. The last question I had was around the Community of Hope campus. They were just here and gave us a presentation on the incredible projects they're having. I'm curious how we approach that as a body. I certainly will do what I can to help them advocate for funding for the necessary improvements to the campus. But I'm curious, right, like it's not on this list specifically, but how we approach all of that, Amy.
Thank you, Mayor, Councilor Bencomo. That's a great question. I actually had a meeting with Natalie's Department, Neighborhood Services, last week with the 5 agencies at Mercia Valley Community of Hope. Their projects are on the ICIP list, and the process that we use with them is that once they have met together as a group, they have an alliance, they meet, they decide which agency will go forward for funding this session. When they do, they come back to me. I get a synopsis of their project and how much they're asking for. I will bring a resolution to council probably in December for you all to affirm that you want to continue to be their fiscal agent and that you are in support of their projects. That I provide that to Legislative Council Service along with their lease agreement as required by Legislative Council Service, and then they submit their request and do their advocacy for their projects during the session. And so while that is a city-owned property and we will continue to own that property, those agencies themselves are the ones who really carry that lobbying effort forward to the legislators.
Okay.
So we have started that process.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Amy. Those are all my questions.
Okay, well, thanks for that great presentation and a lot of stuff going on, so it's been really good. So we appreciate everybody, and good luck in the legislature, upcoming legislature, and gentlemen, nice to meet you, and good luck to you as well. So just bring back a lot of money. Okay, so if there's nothing further, entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved by Flores.
Second, Abeda.
Okay, motion made by Councilor Flores, second by Councilor Beta. Christine?
This is on the motion to adjourn the work session. Councilor Abeda?
Yes.
Councilor Graham?
Yes.
Councilor Bencomo?
Yes.
Councilor Coran?
Yes.
Councilor Flores?
Yes.
Councilor Gondara is absent, and Mayor.
Yes. Okay, we are adjourned. It's 2:59 p.m. We do have an agenda-setting meeting here in just a few minutes. Thanks.
Yes, I know. I'm sorry.
Okay, this is the agenda-setting meeting for October 17th, 2022 City Council meeting. Number 1, non-consent.
1 non-consent.
2, non-consent.
2 non-consent.
3, consent.
3 consent.
4, non-consent.
4 non-consent.
5, consent.
5 consent.
6, non-consent.
6 non-consent.
7, non-consent.
7 non-consent.